everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 2 of the Apothecary Diaries, and this series was already not what I was expecting at all, and in the best way, shape, or form. It took me a little bit to warm up to MaoMao, as you all saw last week, but I get her character now. I get that she's kind of this very sort of badass, like just kind of like, not tomboyish, but she's just kind of like, whatever, we'll deal with it kind of attitude. And I really like it because she kind of knows the system that she's growing up in. She kind of gets what it is about. And the one thing I hope is that I don't want her to become a concubine or a courtesan. I know they were like hinting around at that last episode, but I don't want her to do that because I want her to be relied upon for not just being a body and a face. I like that she's intelligent. I like that she is solving these mysteries and crimes. The only way I could see her becoming a courtesan or a concubine and it being okay is if it allows her to solve more mysteries, but I don't want her just to become some girlfriend to the emperor. That sounds gross. Or a girlfriend to some dude and that's all that she is in life, right? I like that her character kind of subverts that expectation and is doing more than that, especially in a society where there's not a lot of options for the ladies. So I also like Jinshi. He's great. He is our fellow eunuch. Poor guy. I assume he chose this lifestyle, but we don't know for sure. I talked a little bit about not only eunuchs, but also concubines in China last episode, and just some basic research. I'm recording a little ahead, so I'm sure by the time that you all comment and everything with more information, I'll have lots later on in episodes down the road to kind of add to that. But I feel if there's anything talked about in this episode that I might want to do like a little base research on before diving into the discussion, I definitely will. But I love the animation. The animation is gorgeous. I love the OP and ED, which we're going to talk about and see here again really soon, but I really like the OP, really like the ED. I like the animation. It's super fun so far, and so far there was a lot happen in the first episode alone. We've established kind of like not a turf war necessarily, but this conflict between the two lead concubines, which are the one woman, Guoku, and then the other woman losing, the one with the blue hair, she loses her son, he dies, and then the other one that hires MaoMao on as her lady in waiting, her daughter is still alive. So, and then we left off the episode with the soldiers at some encampment are all starting to fall down and they think that it's poison. So I'm like, who knows? Maybe MaoMao will get on the scene and, you know, and tasked with the option or opportunity to find out what that poison is. I am a little concerned because she is using herself kind of like a human guinea pig. I wonder with her now being employed by the concubine if she is gonna like make her get a bath or something, and the people helping her is gonna notice that she has all these these spots on her arm. She has it bandaged up, but I wonder if Jinshi's gonna ask about it or what the case is gonna be. So who knows? But I am all for Jinshi and MaoMao developing this relationship that is just like them being platonic besties, like a Watson and Sherlock scenario. I am here for it, and I'm excited to see. It's a 24 episode season, so I'm excited to see what all adventures she can get into as an apothecary that has a little bit of support in being the emperor's favorite concubine's lady in waiting. So we'll see what shenanigans come out, but I'm pretty excited. I hope you all are too, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right into the Apothecary Diaries, episode 2, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. I want to start out this episode by singing, "Doctor, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of not being attracted to you, Jinshi." Okay, so before I started this discussion, I spent an awkward and uncomfortable amount of time researching the phrase, "Can eunuchs be sexually active?" So that's where we're starting this discussion. Look, y'all. I relate a lot to MaoMao, first and foremost, as we start off this episode, because I'm kind of on the A spectrum myself. I'm not really an active person as far as that goes is involved. I'm not really attracted to people from a sexual sense if at all. So I relate to MaoMao in that she sees Jinshi and is like, ew, no. She's like, you're way too... MaoMao gives off slightly either demisexual or asexual vibes to me, which I'm all about. I'm like, girl, yes, get it. She's like, I'm just here for the science. And I'm like, yes. She's like, I just want to Walter White this place up, make my drugs, and we're going to be great. I'm like, I feel you, girl. But I'm really curious about Jinshi. We're going to talk about Jinshi in this episode, but I did some research about a lot of things involving sexuality, and I didn't get too crazy into it because I have a feeling that we're going to be talking a lot about it over the course of this season. So just doing some basic things as we go through the episode. So fun times. Let's get into this. I like that we start the episode out with, again, the thing that this is just a work of fiction. Don't read too hard into it. And they're being very vague in overall saying like what dynasty it is, what village it is. They just use words like barbarians and the army. We don't want to get into too much specifics here, but I am really glad. I'm surprised that we solved the whole case of the poison like that. She was just like, boom, it was the plants, it was the firewood they were burning. That was it. And from the chopsticks, that was it. Crazy. When we saw her like having the special task, when the ladies in waiting were talking about the special tasks that they were assigning to her and they were really worried about it, I was like, okay, in my head I was going, what task could they give her that the girls would be worried about, but that will connect to the army? And I was like, oh, well, she could be a taste tester, and they're going to bring in the porridge and have her taste tested. That's not what happens, but they figured it out without having to have her taste test. So, and now she's a taste tester for the concubine, the lead concubine, Guoku. We got her in this. I'm glad this one guy who is more handsome than the other soldiers, who's more physically attractive than the other soldiers, he knows what's up. He was like, let's not be too rash now, gentlemen. And they all listened to the Bishonen. Wonderfully handsome army leader, and everybody was spared. I'm glad that worked out for the village. I'm glad MaoMao's like, I'm glad they didn't decimate a village over a misunderstanding. Like, right? I'm glad they didn't do that either. Good thing there, right? So then we have Jinshi, and is it Guansen? Is that his assistant? He has the voice actor of Ushijima, maybe. His voice is very deep. I like him a lot. I like the assistant. He seems very simple, but he's very like congenial and helpful. And I'm like, look at you. He's a good foil to Jinshi's peacockness. Jinshi is such a peacock, and I kind of love it. I'm all for. Does he have like? He's got like a little bit of a masochist kink, right? Is he like into the fact that she's not into him? I'm totally on board with it. I'm like, yes, please, because she's like, get away. It's their love language. Like, ew, you're gross. Oh, right, you're gross too. I feel like also he's maybe into it because he's so used to being this like effeminate looking man that all the girls like, they go crazy for. And it feels like maybe he's grown up without being, you know, it's funny that it's the case because a lot of times if there's like an attractive woman, for example, a lot of times I know friends that they get frustrated because they're like, all they look at me is for my looks. They don't look at me for my brains or my personality. And I feel like Jinshi might be like the male equivalent of that. He's like, well, all these girls look at is how good I look and they just fawn over me, but none of them want to have an intelligent conversation. And then here's MaoMao who's like, can we just talk about drugs? And so he's like, yes. So he gets the report about the village being poisoned, and the village leader was put into custody for aiding the barbarians. We're not going to get too into specifics. And so he's like, yeah, give me a moment. And then he's thinking about it with his assistant, and he's like, oh, by the way, I like that these two men kind of get gossipy. They're just like spilling the tea. They're like, oh, by the way, did you heard that you hired a new lady in waiting for Guoku? How's that going? And it's like they just spill the tea with one another. I would be frustrated if I was the assistant and I had that one little strand of hair sticking out. I want to get that out of the way. At least Jinshi has like the bangs that they part down the middle. So I want to talk about this. Concubine Guoku only has 4 women serving her. He has the main woman and he has the 3 others. Now it's 5 if you count MaoMao. Whereas Li Hua, she has 10 that are with her, high ranking, and has over 10. So I think that one says a lot about her personality, the personalities of the two concubines. With Li Hua, she has a whole lot of ladies in waiting. It's like her posse. It's kind of her way to establish dominance, being like, look at how many women I have watching over me, and I'm the one in charge. It kind of fits her personality based on what we know about her so far. Whereas Gyokyo, she seems a little bit more humble. And the fact that she's like, well, I don't need all of those ladies. I just got my like 4 main squad. We're kind of like the Spice Girls. We don't need another one, you know? But also, it maybe shows that she's more cautious because Li Hua has like a whole bunch of women. But you never know if any of those women will like say something they're not supposed to or do something they're not supposed to. Gyokyo seems a little bit more cautious. And based on what we learn about her in this episode, she might have reason to be cautious, right? The fact that she was nearly poisoned twice while she was pregnant with the emperor's child is a pretty big deal. So the idea of how easy it is to slip poisons in and out of this facility is really, you know, kind of scary, especially when you have all of these servants, all of these eunuchs, all of these staff that's in this palace. It would be easy to slip something and sneak out, right? Or slip something and not be able to trace it back, right? So, case in point, the 2 times she was nearly poisoned. But Jinshi says not only is Concubine Guoku just bright and gentle, she's wise and cautious. Yeah, she's not being willy-nilly about any of this, right? She's being very smart. She would never hire someone of unknown origin. So she has to be wary about everyone that's around her. And so then the assistant is like, well, yeah, so who's this new lady in waiting? And then Jinshi, he's so excited. He's like, I just found the right pawn. Gaoshun. It's the freckled servant girl. And when he calls her a pawn, he's like, her knowledge of medicine is too valuable to pass up. I'm going to use her. And then Gaoshun's like, but what if she abused that knowledge? What if she took it too far? And he's like, well, I'll make sure she can't do that. It should be easy. I'll just seduce her a little just in case. And I'm like, I love these. Like, oh, I'll just seduce her and get her on my good side. And then I'll make sure to have her under my thumb. And that fails miserably in this episode. I'm like, okay. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, dude, the Smolder is not going to work. It's like, it very much has a Rapunzel and Finn vibe from Tangled, in that he's like, here comes the Smolder, and she has like the frying pan about to hit him with it, like, can we make drugs now? So poor MaoMao, she leaves behind her friend. She gets to go serve the high-ranking concubine. She's like, yeah, I don't really want to, but I guess I'll go. I love her attitude. She's like, whatever, let's get this over with. Meanwhile, you have Jinshi come up, and at first, I felt kind of bad for MaoMao because Jinshi, he has all these ladies swooning over him, and he comes in and he's like, hey, sweet thing, and she's like, gross. And I was afraid that the girls that were following him would all get like mad at her, because I'm like, Jinshi, do you realize these girls are going to get jealous of MaoMao because you're around her all the time, and they would like you around them all the time? But I feel like if anything like that happened, then Gaoshun would probably take care of it, or Jinshi would. And I like that he's like, here comes the Smolder, and he like pets her bangs, and she's like, I love that she gets like, the chill that she gets reminds me of the chill that the cat from Kiki's Delivery Service. Oh, it was his name. Oh goodness, it's not Goji. Oh, is it Goji? I can't remember the cat's name. Gigi, the cat Gigi in Kiki's Delivery Service. He like gets the chill that goes up his spine. It's that exact same animation. And she's like, ugh. To be fair, she does not know Jinshi hardly at all. They've met a total of like 48 hours and they barely know each other. So if I only knew a guy for like, 2 days and he like tried to run his hand through my hair, I'd be like, stop. I'd be like, we need some personal space and you need to back off for a second until we know each other better. So I totally am down for what she is like, her reaction to him is like, no. And she's like, excuse me. And he's like, oh, that didn't work. I like the friend says, good luck, MaoMao. And he just like blows the bangs back and all the girls freak out. And he's like, ew, gross. So then we meet Hong Niang. Hong Niang is the head lady in waiting. It took me a second until I did a little research, because during the reaction, I was like, I was like, she's being a wench. She's being mean to her. But that's not entirely the case. I did a little research after the episode because I was like, why was that scene there? And we're going to talk about it here in just a second. But she shows her around to all of the rooms. And she shows her, like, the really... Like, well, first they go and see Guoku. And she, like, her little daughter is so cute. She has, like, her, like, hair in a tiny little bun at the top of her head. She's so sweet. I love it. The Jade Pavilion is where they are. And she's like, we'll show you around. She's like, here's the parlor where we bring guests. Here's the kitchen where you can do some simple cooking. I'm reading Scumville Self-Saving System at the same time, and this kitchen area reminds me a lot of the main character. He has a couple of disciples that are training with him, and they have like a kitchen area. This makes me think of that. And then they have like a living room area, and then the other ladies in waiting. The other ladies in waiting, I was trying to think of what they reminded me of. So we have Yinghua. We have Guyan, and then we have Eilon. And I was trying to remember what they all reminded me of, and I couldn't think of it for the longest time. They remind me of the three fairies from Sleeping Beauty, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather. They remind me of the three fairies. They're always like kind of bumbling about, and they're just like, no, you do this, you do that, come on. But they're all concerned for MaoMao. It makes me think that they're concerned for her like the three fairies are concerned for Aurora in Sleeping Beauty. It's super cute. I love all of their personalities. They're just, and they think that because she has the bandages around her arm that she's been abused at her previous home. And I'm like, I'm surprised this episode they didn't find out that she was messing with poisons. I'm wondering, I keep waiting for the moment where Jinshi sees her unwrap the bandage and sees her arm and realizes like how serious she is about it. I'm waiting for that moment. And I think he will appreciate her more knowing she's kind of the real deal. But I will wait and see if that ends up happening. I don't know if it will. But yeah, they're all so sweet, like the three of them. And I love that they have the primary colors. They're like blue, red, and yellow. And that's so sweet. It's cute. And MaoMao's like, they were kind of weird. But they seem really nice. I like them. I like that poor unfortunate girl. She's got to test poisons. So then she gets her own room, which is nice. She's like, I've gotten quite the promotion. And it's nice that she's like, this pavilion's run by an elite sect, so of course a newcomer wouldn't be totally welcome. But she's like, why do they seem so sympathetic to me? Then Jinshi shows up with Gaoshun and says she's going to be testing poisons and do taste testing. I love that she has the cat feature. She has like the little cat ears and like the little claws come out, but then she like hides it. She's like, oh yes, testing poisons, of course. She's like, it's fine. And they're like, food cooked for concubines changes hands a few times before it's brought here. And that would instantly make it also easy for somebody to poison because you're passing it off from person to person. If poison gets slipped in during the handoff, who's keeping track of all the hands that it runs through, right? Yeah, it's possible for it to be poisoned during that process. And so, in fact, when Concubine Guoku became pregnant, her poison was poisoned at least twice. The taster back then received nerve damage and can't move her hands or feet again. So that's why they're worried about it. And the girls are like, oh, we don't want this girl to end up like that. That's why they're sympathetic towards me. So like, here you go. And the thing about it is MaoMao's not too concerned because she's like, okay. She's like, these bowls, they're ceramic. I like that she recommends using silver because the poison reacts to it. And that was part of the test as well to prove that she was good. What's interesting is she talks about she might not be suited for this job because she's so resistant to poisons. So she's like, if there was any poisons, would she detect it because her body's resistant? So I think that is something that she'll eventually bring up and maybe not be a food tester all that time. But then she talks about the experiments on her arm, and oh my God, the one where she has the snake bite, and it like breaks open the skin, and there's like exposed like muscle there. I'm like, girl, there's like pus and all this stuff on it. That looked disgusting. I'm like, girl. She's like, I did a lot of experiments on my arm. And then her dad's like off in the distance, like, what a mad scientist. Ha ha ha. I'm like, what? What? I was gonna look up who is the main character. I've watched season 1 of Dr. Stone and I've read the manga. So who is the main character of that? What was his name? I'm gonna find it really, really quick. The main character is Senku. Senku is the main character. Yes, Senku Ishigami. She reminds me a lot of Senku in this episode because he's like all about science in that series, and she like is all about science too. Like the two of them, if we did a crossover, they would be a match made in heaven. They would like, let's get to it. Like I feel like she would thrive in the Dr. Stone world quite a bit. But yeah, she's like, my body's pretty, you know, good against poison, so I might not be the best person to do this. But she's like, I'll happily be a taste tester. I always kind of wanted to, the county that I live in the US, we have like a fair every year and they have like a pie eat contest. And I always wanted to be like a judge for the pie contest because then you get to taste test all the pies. And those aren't poison, so then you just get to enjoy it. But here, she talks about replacing the silver plates and all the food looks good. And she's like, well, we use the ceramics to test you on purpose. So then our headmistress here, she's like, you know a lot about poisons and medicines and you can read. She's like, you mentioned you're literate. You know, if you'd mentioned that earlier, you would have gotten paid a little bit more. So then she says, oh, well, I was kidnapped and brought here. So I'm incensed that part of my pay that it gets sent to she's like, I don't like that part of my pay gets sent to the kidnappers. So I didn't want them to get more money. And that's when the head lady in waiting, she says, so you'd rather take less pay than give your kidnappers drinking money. She's like, basically. And so then she hands her the jar and she goes to take it and she drops it, right? And breaks it. And she's like, oh. And she's like, oh, wow, this was quite expensive. So she says, you couldn't afford it with your lady in waiting salary. So how will you send money to your family? She's like, in fact, we might need to charge them. And she winks. And MaoMao's like, oh, I'm so sorry. She's like, please take it out of the money to my family. If that's not enough, then for my savings too. And she's like, okay, I'll arrange the paperwork. And by the way, here's hazard pay for your food tasting services. So during the reaction, I was like, why did she do that? Why is she charging her? I was getting Ouran High School Host Club vibes from the moment, being like, but what this scene is it's very tongue-in-cheek, like her little wink to MaoMao. What actually is happening is I did a little bit of research, and the idea is that when these girls were kidnapped and taken to the palace, the kidnappers would register themselves as the victim's family, and then the money that she received, part of it would go to the family, which is the kidnappers. So that's why MaoMao didn't say that she could, read and write, because she didn't want more money going to the people that literally like abducted her, which is fair. And so what the head lady in waiting was doing here wasn't anything bad. In fact, she was going, oh no, this jar is broke. Well, we can't take the salary out of what you're making for your food tasting services. So we're going to bill your kidnappers and they're going to owe us some money. And by the way, here's some hazard pay for taking the food, testing. I'm like, damn, she literally said, here's how, she's like, you mean to tell me you hid the fact you were a smart woman out of spite to your kidnappers? Oh, honey, here's how the royal palace does spite. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, yes, all right, I'm here for it. Yes, please. Okay, cool, work, girl. That completely changed my view around when you realize what the actual context is. I'm like, okay, awesome. And she's like, sweet, I get pay. She's like, that'll do. So, and then she says, man, the lady in waiting, she knows how to motivate. She's like, girl has got it together. And she's like, okay. So then we go back to Jinshi, right? Who's hearing about the workers and about the army. And so poor MaoMao, she's bored. She's like, all I do is like sit there and taste test for 2 meals and midday tea time. And I love that it shows her. She's like ballooned out. And she has like the pig ears and the pig nose. She's like, all I'm doing is just sitting here eating. She's like, I want to do something. And I love when they call her face and she turns over and there's like the pig face. She's like, I'm ready for my food. It's so freaking cute. I'm going to take a picture of that. It's adorable. I'm like, oh girl. But that's not what she's being called there for. Jinshi has called her. I love that when she's like, ew. He calls her and he's like, yeah, why won't this work on her? Why won't my charm work? Because then he turns to the other ladies in waiting and they're like, oh my God, he looked at me. And she's just like, ew, no. So then they talk about the rhododendron. And that's when he explains the poison in the meat buns. And she recognizes there's an aphrodisiac in the meat buns. And he's like, oh, you can tell without eating it. And she's like, were you trying to... Now, the only part about this episode is what he's trying to do is test her loyalty. To be like, is she going to try to, like, have an affair with him? Or is she going to be loyal as a maid in waiting? And the aphrodisiac, she's like, were you trying to drug me with these? Like, how dare you, sir? No, thank you. Plus, she said that her body's used to the drugs, so it probably wouldn't affect her as much. Girl's been smoking so much weed on the side that it's going to take a pretty large edible to have an effect. So she's like, they're not harmful. Have fun with them. And he's like, well, given who I received them from, I can't do that. And she's like, well, maybe that person might visit you tonight. I'm like, girl, what are you suggesting? She's like, did this guy try to make me eat one knowing that there was an aphrodisiac? She's like, I'm creeped out by him. Was he trying to drug me? Ew. And Jinshi's like, why are you looking at me like that? So then, of course, Guoku, she thinks the whole thing's hilarious. She loves the fact that Jinshi is not getting anywhere with MaoMao and thinks that the whole thing's really funny. So then he says, I have a question for you. And that's when he asks about the army and she figures everything out. So then he says, well, can you make an aphrodisiac? And she's like, wait, make? You mean I actually get to make drugs? I love her face when she's like, I get to make drugs? Really? It's freaking hilarious. I love it. And then she's like, yeah, I mean, I suppose you get. And he's like, really? You're really excited about that? She's like, yes, if I have the proper ingredient, the proper tools, I could make something like that. Mm-hmm. And so then and then they're like, well, so then, okay, they go by the one concubine's room and the one woman says, Master Jinshi, where are you headed? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to my office. Can I help you? And then she's like, well, I wondered if you have tea in my room with me. And he's like, and he puts on the Smolder and says, oh no, I have work to go to. Excuse me. And she's left like just fawning over him. And then so then Gaoshun says the servants are not aware that Master Jinshi serves as a test of their loyalty to the emperor. Just because the emperor doesn't visit her, she shouldn't try to lure other men to her room. It's indiscretion. A concubine cannot simply be beautiful or well educated. They have to be loyal to the emperor and be chaste. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that Jinshi is there. He's pretty. And so the emperor's using him as a test, right? I'm assuming he's a eunuch. And for a while I was like, is he? But I did a little bit of research. Again, this has been a fun evening. And the one guy, Gaoshun's like, man, it must suck to be like a test for all these women. The emperor's pretty severe, just using you as a tester. And he's like, we all use whatever is available to us. But I like that, Jinshi's like, you know what? Not only does she feel no lust for me, but that look. And the look, like the glare she gives him. He's definitely like, I've never been so harshly looked down on in my entire life. He's got a kink. Our boy's a masochist, and he has a kink. So I did do a little tiny bit of research talking about I had to do the search, can eunuchs have pleasure? And you would be surprised what you get. There's actually a lot of studies being done about using castration, like for men that have testicular cancer and things like that. So there's actually studies being done about men and castration and sexual arousal and things like that. If you have testicular cancer, like your options and things like that. And basically the thing is your testosterone levels, they dramatically reduce once the source of your testosterone is no longer there. However, there is still some hormones there, meaning that it's not like you can't feel sexual attraction. You just don't have, anything to do with it if you don't have a penis and testicles. But there's still a sex drive that can be present. So just because Jinshi no longer has his genitals doesn't mean that he can't feel sexual attraction or arousal or things like that. It's just how you deal with that drive is handled differently. And I mean, in a woman's case, you would wonder, well, why would that woman want Jinshi to come to her room? He doesn't have a penis or testicles. Well, he can still do things to her that would be pleasant for her. And she potentially can do things that would be pleasant for him. Just, it reaches a wall at some point. But yeah, so the idea is he can still have some arousal. It's just, what do we do with that? Our man definitely has a kink with being, I feel like MaoMao could step on him and put her foot up against his face and he'd be all about it. That's how I feel like that would go. And I like the Gao Shun's like, well, I'm going to take my leave since you're getting kind of turned on by the fact this girl is disdainful to you. I'm going to go now. Bye. I also want to note real quick, as Jinshi is realizing the Gao Shun is gone and has left him. And so then that one, what does she say there? She talks about the person visiting you tonight. And he's like, oh, no. He's like, tonight. And he like locks the door like, no, absolutely not. So that's interesting to me. So, I mean, I don't know how much y'all know about, I read BL. There's no really, how do you bring this topic up? He locks the door at night thinking that someone's going to visit him. Just because he doesn't have any testicles or a penis doesn't mean that things can't happen with him. So I'll just leave it at there. So it makes sense why he locks the door. He's like, no, thank you, no. So I like that MaoMao and Jinshi both, neither of them are really looking for a sexual partner, obviously. But they both he kind of has this attraction to her, and the fact that she's disdainful to him is just making it worse. She's just like, what is this guy? What is his deal? But before we go on to this part where she looks for herbs, I do want to make note that there is an article about, I mentioned last week about the last eunuch in China, who is Sun Yaoting, who passed in 1997. In 2009, Reuters had an article that came out about an interview in Beijing with Sun Yaoting, talking about his life with the emperor, and his actual story, Yaoting's story, is incredibly tragic. Like, I'm going to read a little bit to you because we talked about him last week, and I wanted to bring him up. That he was basically China's last eunuch, was tormented and impoverished in youth, punished in revolutionary China for his role as the, quote, emperor's slave, but finally feted and valued, largely for outlasting his peers, to become a unique relic, a piece of living history. So they talk about, he had stories of the torturous rituals of the Forbidden City, Emperor Puyi's last moments there, and the troubled puppet court ran by the Japanese during the 1930s. He escaped back to the heart of a civil war and became a communist official and then a target of radical leftists before finally he left in peace. This turbulent life has been recorded in the quote-unquote The Last Eunuch of China by amateur historian Jia Yinghua, who over the years of friendship drew out of Sun the secrets that were too painful or intimate to spill to prying journalists or state archivists. He died in 1996 in an old temple that had become his home, and his biography was finally published in English this year, so in 2009. So I might look into this because it seems interesting. It unveils formerly taboo subjects like the sex life of eunuchs. I'm going to look this up because I'm curious. And the emperor they served, the agonizing castrations often done at home and also often lethal, and the incontinence and shame that came with the promise of great power, which we talked about last week. And it says here in the interview, he was conflicted over to tell the secrets of the emperor, adding that Sun had preserved a loyalty to the old system because he dedicated so much of his life to it. The one who wrote the biography said that they were the only person that he trusted. He didn't even confide in his family after they threw away his quote-unquote treasure, which he says treasure was often a word used by eunuchs as slang for their preserved genitals. It says that his preserved genitals were discarded during the chaotic 1966 to 76 Cultural Revolution, when having anything from the old society of that time could put your life at risk. The person that did his biography said he only cried about two things when telling me about the castration and about the loss of his quote-unquote treasure. And so they talk about the idea of this last eunuch, Yao Ting, saying that Sun's impoverished family set him on a painful, risky path in hopes that he might one day be able to crush a bullying village landlord who stole their fields and burned their house down. It says his desperate father performed the castration on the bed of their mud-walled home with no anesthetic and only an oil-soaked paper as a bandage. A goose quill was inserted in his urethra to prevent it from getting blocked as the wound healed. Oh my God. He was unconscious for 3 days and could barely move for 2 months. And when he finally rose from his bed, history played the first of a series of cruel tricks on him. He discovered the emperor he hoped to serve had abdicated several weeks earlier. So, I mean, this was like this was the late 1800s. Or no, this was like the early 1900s. He died in 1996. This was the 1900s when this was all going on, like this method and everything. So it is not something from hundreds and hundreds of years past. It's fairly recent, but there's a little bit more. I might actually look into this book because I'm kind of curious. I want to know more, especially with Jinshi as our lead eunuch and all this. I want to know more about their life in this and about these trade secrets. So who knows? I might check out this book and see what we get. But I thought that was interesting, right? So then MaoMao goes on her way, saying that she's going to go off to find the drugs, off to find all the things. And I like all the maids in waiting are like seeing her go, and the lead one's like, what a strange girl. So she goes off and meets with Jinshi and the current quack doctor, as she calls him. And he does worry me a little bit because he seems a little bit threatened by this young girl. Or it's not Jinshi, it's was it Gonson? We'll get his name in a minute. His name is hard for me to remember. But the one doctor's a little bit jealous of her. I'm glad this guy's like, let me introduce myself again. Gaoshan. I'm Jinshi's assistant. And she's like, hi, Gaoshan. Gaoshan is a sweetheart. He's such a sweetie, and he's very congenial. He's a good foil to Jinshi, who can be quite peacockish. And the one doctor is like, who's this girl think she is, running into my territory? I do worry that he's going to make life hard for her, but I guess as long as she stays in her lane with Lady Gokyo, it's going to be okay. Because it seems like the medical doctor here is more with Li Hua, so it feels like MaoMao is going to be the doctor for the apothecary for Guoku, and then Li Hua is going to be the quack doctor. So we're going to have dueling apothecaries, you know. Also, Gaoshun is a pretty big man. He's a very tall man, too. And then they're like, you can use anything in this room. Girl, you might as well have opened up Belle's Library and Beauty and the Beast, and there'd be thousands of books all around you. Like, Little Mermaid's part of your world is like playing, and she's like, look at all this. Look at all these treasures. Gadgets and gizmos aplenty. Who's its and what's its galore. She's like, you want thingamabobs? I got 20 shrooms. I'm ready to go. Like, she's so excited doing this little apothecary dance. It's so cute. And Jinshi's like, is this a cursed dance? What is this? I love she's instantly like, oh, you're here. She's like, look, I really like drugs. Leave me alone. I also like the idea that she brings up being able to use paper freely. What a luxury. Because, yeah, we take so much advantage now. Like, you just tear out a piece of paper like it's nothing. But back hundreds of years ago, paper was a luxury. Not everybody had it. And the process to make it wasn't something automated. Because, you know, the Industrial Revolution hadn't happened yet. So it wasn't just something you could have like it was nothing. Paper was a pretty high demand commodity. And so then Gaoshun is like, what else do you need? She's like, well, he's really quick to notice things compared to his master. She's like, this guy who's gross. And she's like, if you're not going to do anything, just go away. I feel like that both of them are kind of tsundere towards each other. Like, she's just like, well, go away if you're not going to do anything. But that was the first little hint that maybe she does kind of be like, like she could like him. But then we find out that the cacao, there's not enough left. So they have to go into the emergency supplies. He's like, we'll definitely get some more. She's like, fine. Okay, I guess you're not useless. So she has milk, butter, sugar, honey, and powdered cacao. Right? And they're like, what is she making? And they're like, a snack? I'm like, girl, if you knew. She's like, get back to work. And then she like basically makes it all. She's like, I had a taste of cacao just once in the past. And, okay. So I don't know if that woman's supposed to be your mom or just a random concubine, but they give her, I guess it was supposed to be a random concubine because she eats it and is like, where, she's like, maybe a malicious customer wanted to get a popular courtesan's attention. So I guess it was just another courtesan, but he got banned from the shrewd old lady. So she makes some to use and then she takes the rest of it and makes basically some aphrodisiac chocolate brownies and leaves them out. which the ladies eat, and then we'll get to that here in just a second. But then she gets distracted. She's like going out, and she's like, oh my god, medicinal herbs. And they're like just shimmering. They looked like, if you've ever played like Pokemon Go or something, like little shimmery items. It tells you there's something important there, and you go get it, and you're like, oh, there it is. Like, so cute and so fun. So then, of course, she's like, I got too carried away, and I gathered up all of these medicinal herbs. Whoops. But when she takes it back, I like that Jinshi and the head, I can't think of her name right now, but the head lady in waiting, they're both so flustered and frustrated. And then poor Gaoxun's like, oh man. But yeah, our three ladies have a lovely moment together. They shared an amazing, they're just ladies in waiting. They're just good friends. They each ate one of the aphrodisiacs. So yeah, I like Jinshi's like, well, at least we know it works. And she's like, ew. And then, of course, the head lady in waiting is like, what's going on? She's like, well, it is what it is. I love MaoMao saying, well, she like pulls up the rope and she's like, well, they didn't go all the way. Oh my god. I love it. It's hilarious. So I did a little research, and yes, there is aphrodisiac chocolate. I'm allergic to cocoa, so I couldn't have any of that. Like, that would just be, nope, gonna kill me. So can't have that. But aphrodisiac chocolate, it says, does it really work? It says whether you've heard from, I found this online about a company that makes it. It says, upon indulging aphrodisiac chocolates, you can notice a subtle yet discernible shift in sensory awareness. High quality chocolate can heighten sense of taste. And it says, psychologically, the PEA in cocoa mimics the brain chemistry of a person in love, potentially reducing stress and elevating mood, which can be conducive to a romantic encounter. Physiologically, increased blood flow from the flavonoids and energy-boosting properties of maca, which is used in aphrodisiac chocolate, may leave you feeling more vibrant and responsive to physical touch. The combined effort of these ingredients is comprehensive enhancement of sexual experience, from heightened senses to improved endurance and desire. That being said, how long does it take to work? And it says that their chocolates at this one site may take about 20 to 30 minutes to go into effect. But it also says each person's body metabolizes substances at a unique pace, so it depends on your metabolic rate, how, and your age, genetics, how effectively your body's going to. It's kind of like if you eat edibles that have marijuana in them, some people's bodies react to different amounts. So it just kind of depends on what you do. But it usually takes 20 or 30 minutes after you eat to have absorption into your body. So there you go. And it usually lasts, as they say in this episode, 1 to 3 hours. Cool. Says, I like this website says the duration allows ample time for individuals to enjoy an enhanced intimate experience. I'm like, there you go. It does ask about any long-term effects from them. It doesn't really say there's any, long-term problems, although they do say in the episode that, if you eat too much of it, you might get too much blood flow. And then I like that they talk about it causing nosebleeds, because you often think in Japanese anime when they have somebody that's like aroused or, sexually like lusting after someone, they have like the blood spurt out of their nose and the big nosebleed. That's the trope. That's the joke. This kind of goes along with that. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, so they have the aphrodisiac and they're like, what was the other one? She's like, oh, that was just a midnight snack for me. And they're all like, I love that Gaoxun is just like, okay. Gyoku's like, what are you gonna do with it? The lead handmaid is like, what? And she's kind of like, I love her, like, what? And then Jinshi's like, but you've been so disdainful. You mean, are you like some kind of sexual deviant? Like, I love his repulsed face. It's hilarious. And she's like, if you're used to alcohol and other stimulants, it's not gonna have much of an effect. And he's like, oh, so it wouldn't be a problem if I ate it. So since that is alluding to the fact that he's experimented on his body as well, I don't know. And so I guess he's saying that. And I like that Gaoxun and her say, please don't. They're like, please don't get any ideas. I like Gaoxun's like, I don't want to deal with this, sir. And then, of course, Gyoku thinks it's absolutely hilarious. And he's like, oh, I'm joking. And she's like, what a reprehensible joke to make in front of the emperor's concubine. But if he approached someone with an impassioned blush on that face. And then, yeah, it immediately captivate any person, male or female. Yeah, so she's like, you say that as a joke in front of Gyokyu, but if you looked flushed and kind of lustful and you went up to any other girl, then they might be entranced by it, and that would be a problem, right? So maybe she's kind of catching on to what he's throwing down and what his purpose is. He does have a great face after all. So she tells him to be careful. It's quite strong. Eat him one at a time. And then you might get nosebleeds if you do too much. And I like that Gyokyu's like, maybe you can make some for the Emperor so we can have some exciting bedtimes. And she's like, well, it can, what does she say there? She's like, it should be around 3 times more potent than the usual tonic. And she, of course, then Gyokyu's like, 3 times more, huh? 3 times more, huh? Okay. I love that she instantly kind of like starts doing the mental math, right? And she's like, please only use it when you are alone with the person in mind, just so that it's safe. And then they all go. And that's when the head lady in waiting says, so she can make drugs. How reliable. So then as she's leaving, Jinshi, like, she's like, it's finally over. And he does the whole, like, running his hands through the hair, like, trying to be seductive in that moment. And saying, good work. And I thought he was going to kiss her neck. I thought he was going to kiss it, but he just gets right up to it. Like he's tempting her. And says, thank you. Wondering, I'm like, girl, do you have a praise kink? And then he walks off with Gao Shun. But it doesn't look like there was any taken from the table. The 3 that are missing are still there. That the 3 ladies in waiting took. But none of them were taken by him. And she's like, I hope there aren't any victims. And of course, Jinshi is pleased as punch, right? So meanwhile, we end this episode with this figure on top of the wall that looks scary as F. And then that's where we leave off the episode at, like the fudge. But yeah, I just... I feel like in that moment, MaoMao's like, he's dangerous. Jinshi is very dangerous. Because even when he's not putting on the Smolder, in that moment when he thanked her, he was being real. And she's like, ooh. She's like, that could have got... She's like, he is trouble. I love this episode so much. It was so good. I really like the mature humor of this series. It's a little raunchy, and I kind of like it. It's different. It's definitely not your kids fantasy series. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be researching things I didn't think I would be researching. So in any case, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I'm excited for episode 3. The rule of 3, the rule of the 3rd episode in. There's also the rule of 8, but we've got a while before we get to that. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah. I'll be back real soon with more of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye!